And like a flash of lightning, we are back. Hello and welcome to FECast episode 75, otherwise known as Weather Report episode 2. We are talking about the power of teamwork today. I am one of your main co-hosts. I am Stormblessed. Sunny is still on his little vacay, and so joining me today once again to reprise Weather Report is my good buddy Stormguard. So Stormguard, how are you doing today?
Hello, I'm doing very well. I'm here as the poor man's version of Sunny today, but I am very excited to talk about everything to do with teamwork in Eternal.
Yeah, it's a good topic because it's a topic that gets brought up a lot. You know, everyone wants friends, right? And so, basically that's what this is all about. It's having a group of people and, enjoying company together. But before we get started with that, a cool thing happened recently that, sorry. What does SOS mean?
So, popular streamer Kas, most famous for their love of slimes, organized the Slimes of Summer fundraising campaign over the month of June, aka Pride Month, in order to raise money for the Trevor Project, including various incentives for different checkpoints, including chat drafts, special chat emotes, dyeing their hair a certain color, and so on and so forth. Altogether, they managed to raise over $2,000 for the Trevor Project. So that is an amazing initiative. Super well done, Kas and Kas's community. And it's just another amazing demonstration of what the Eternal community can do when we all come together, which is totally awesome and definitely worth shouting out. IMHO.
That is indeed an excellent initiative that Cassandrith put on. So congratulations, Cassandrith, for a very successful fundraiser. Let's move on to our main topic today. This is a topic that Stormguard wanted to broach, so a lot of this will be led by Stormguard. Today's big topic is about Eternal teams, working on an Eternal team, joining an Eternal team, what a team even is. So, Stormguard, would you like to get us off with what a team even is?
We literally mean any group of people who are playing Eternal and want to play Eternal together. So this could be just 2 people, you and someone else. It could be 3 people. It could be 15 people. Now, there are some more formalized teams with these fancy schmancy names, but for the purposes of this discussion, we're just going to refer to a team as any group of Eternal players who are working together. Now, let's start off with the most age-old adage about teams, that you need a team of people to work with you to succeed. That is just simply not true. I mean, the thing about being a good Eternal player is that you're a good Eternal player. The logic may be a little bit circular, but you must be a good Eternal player, team or not. And I think that whilst having other people to bounce your ideas off of and someone else to test with and just get an additional pair of eyes, that is very, very helpful. But ultimately, you need to demonstrate that you are capable of being a competent Eternal player on your own. Otherwise, no one's going to want to work with you.
Yeah, so what this myth ultimately comes down to is a bit of survivorship bias, right? And confirmation bias. It's both twofold, right? So you confirm the myth whenever a boxer or a collector wins a tournament. And you're like, oh, you can only win if you're on a team, because you less often notice when the people without teams wins. And then the survivorship bias is, of course, you only look at who's winning. In that case, more of the devoted players, i.e. the players that would do well with or without a team, will end up finding teams, right? Like Collector probably could do well. Maybe they do slightly less consistently well, but they're going to still do really well regardless of whether or not they were in TBC or not, because Collector is just a really good player. In a sense, the really good players end up sorting themselves into teams pseudo-naturally, right? And, that doesn't mean that you're a bad player if you're not in a team, because most of the time, in order to get into a team, you have to start not being on a team, right? Most Eternal players, the vast majority of them, start in the game not being on a team. Eventually you make that transition, and then you find yourself a team, right? That doesn't say that being on a team won't help you succeed, because being in some sort of social group where you can improve your gameplay together, improve your decks together, obviously can help improve your game, but it's not necessary to succeed.
Absolutely. A large part of working together with anyone in any capacity is demonstrating the ability to produce good ideas and just have good gameplay, right? Stormblast definitely raises a very good point with regards to saying someone like Collector or the Boxer probably still doing equally well, even without being on a team. And part of that is because they have good ideas. They are able to execute those good ideas with good gameplay. And therefore, regardless of whether they have additional people to help chip in and improve those ideas, they're still going to do really well. And that, I think, is definitely part of the learning process. I think it's a little bit naive to say that, especially if you're starting out as a completely newer or relatively inexperienced player, that you're going to be able to develop and refine those ideas as well as someone as the Collector or the Boxer.
And then, of course, the final point here is what exactly is a team can vary dramatically. There's no one set of characteristics that describes all teams aside from the original pure definition of it's multiple people working together. And beyond that, the scope of multiple working together is huge. And of course, the one thing that a lot of you, in a sense, care about, right, in this version of team, right, the sort of acronym version of teams, the multi-person teams, there are two broad categories of teams that Stormguard has outlined. And so, Stormguard, would you like to go over what your two broad categories of teams are?
At least out of the quote-unquote acronymed existing teams, there are two broad categories that most teams, one way or another, will fall on the spectrum of. I've chosen the two probably most extreme examples, but definitely somewhere along those ways. The first is what I like to call the group of friends, right? So these teams are basically just a group of people who liked to enjoy each other's company, they like to hang out together, and on occasion, they will test Eternal together. The Eternal testing is more of a side thought than anything else. These are sort of teams that will often have like non-Eternal related activities. Probably one of the classic examples of this type of team is my own team, TEJ, right? People aren't invited onto TEJ necessarily because they have a certain number of day twos or particularly high tournament finishes. They're invited onto TJ because we like them as a human being and want to spend more time talking to them. That is basically how it goes. These players might not be, the Collectors or Gragas or Doc 28s of the Eternal world, but they are still all very, very strong players. You'd have to be a very strong player in order to be able to appropriately defend your opinion or appropriately contribute to your team. That is a natural given, but you do not need to necessarily have the same kind of tournament finishes or household name pedigree as might be the case for some of these other players.
Speaking of household name pedigrees, on the other end of the spectrum, we have Team CSB/ET, otherwise known as the Super Conglomerate, after their one showing up at a tournament where I think they all brought the same deck, and I think like all but one of them made the top seed. It was a very spectacular showing. And these people, you do have to have a consistent, a dramatic finish. The pre-cast Stormguard was using the example of Nico Alba was picked up by, was it by ET?
Nico Alba was picked up by ET, I believe, at the end of the 2020 season.
I mean, they did well throughout the entire season, but obviously their big finish was they got second place at Worlds, right? That was their big crowning achievement that, segued them into a spot on this team.
I believe they managed to actually pull off the let's put everyone into top 64, almost everyone in any case, maybe twice for both the Throne and the Expedition Open. These are some extremely, extremely strong players, and they come up with amazing decks on a very, very consistent basis. But I think one feature of the team is that they are all brought together on the team as a result of being good at Eternal. Obviously, since neither of us are members of the Super Conglomerate, we can't comment, but I would imagine that most of their discussion, especially in their private channels, focus around Eternal. I'm sure they have good, friendly relationships with each other. They're probably not going to extend that to say, I don't know, posting food pics in their private channel, which is something TJ may or may not do. I will neither confirm nor deny that we regularly post delicious looking food pics in each other's private channels.
That sounds like a confirmation to me. This is an FECast exclusive that TEJ has a food pics channel.
And they are delicious. But my point is that even though these are both strong teams, like definitely to toot my own horn here, I don't think you could say that TJ isn't a strong team. Like we've managed to put a reasonable number of people into the top 64 multiple times. I think we're currently 5th in the FETL. Like we're not doing terribly. We're not doing fantastic, but we're not doing terribly either. And I definitely think that. Sorry, I just can't stop laughing at me, like just roasting my own team. Hold on. Okay. I don't think it's fair to say that the let's just all be friends approach doesn't necessarily yield poorer results. Whilst I do think CSB ET, i.e. the super conglomerate, has a lot of very strong players, I definitely think we need to take into account that CSB ET has a lot of very strong players, and these strong players would put up ridiculous results regardless of whether they were on the super conglomerate or not. Which then leads to the point I'd like to make. It's all about finding the right fit of a team for you. You need to know what you want to get out of working with other people, and not just like, hey, this team is inviting me to be on a team, and because this one team invited me, I should accept, right? My own personal opinion is I don't think that I would particularly enjoy the CSB ET testing environment, because outside of just testing, I really do enjoy hanging out, quote unquote, with the rest of my teammates. Like we talk about food together, we play party games together.
So what are the odds that after this, if members of these highfalutin teams listen to the FECast, what are the odds that they make a food channel just to be like, spite Stormguard, be like, look, see, we're friends too. We have a food channel as well.
Yes, honestly, all teams should have a food channel. Like, if nothing else, the majority of people on this planet enjoy eating food and enjoy looking at good food.
I was really hoping you'd say the majority of the people on this planet eat food. And then be like, well, yes, the majority of people on this planet do eat food. The vast majority, as a matter of fact.
Oh my goodness. I think, yeah, everyone should eat food.
Food or food substitutes.
Yes. Listeners out there, if you're not eating food, please eat food. Food
or
is
drinking
good.
Water. Always remember to hydrate.
Yes.
You should also tell if you're watching a Twitch streamer, tell them to hydrate. I'm sure they'll love it when you tell them to hydrate.
Yeah.
So, all this brings us into our next topic, that is to say, community engagement / engaging with the community. This is both an eye to sort of in general communication as well as an eye to group creation of some kind. Because, eventually, if you enjoy hanging out with people, you will eventually want to come together in a more concise fashion, right? Instead of just being random, amino acids floating out in, primordial goo, you'll eventually come together and create, primordial life. And that primordial life might eventually replicate itself, evolve into some sort of higher stage of life. In this case, would be, a super conglomerate. In this metaphor of life, is ET or is CSB the mitochondria? Which one was eaten by the other?
I think CSB was eaten by ET, right?
Ooh.
I believe ET is the larger organism, just based on the number of players on ET. So I'd like to imagine CSB was eaten by ET. Also, ET has like an actual name, Eternal Titans, whereas as of now, we still don't even know what CSB stands for. So,
it stands for coming second, basically.
Yes, that is.
Or clearly second best, one of the two.
Oh, gosh. And if that was the case, that would make even more sense for them to be eaten by ET. Boom. Drop the mic.
Anyways, so how do you feel about talking in a community?
I think it's very important to put your ideas and your thoughts out there, be it in Twitch chat, be it in in-game chat, be it in Discord, so that other people can, see your ideas. Contrary to popular belief, most people are not telepathic. I know this may sound shocking to everyone, but most people aren't going to understand your thoughts unless you communicate it to them. And through those thoughts, they can then see if you would be a person that they would be interested in working with.
Specifically, if you think about an eye towards Eternal, you'd be talking about your Eternal ideas, sharing your deck list on the main Discord, or your thoughts on your X cards, saying, I think Supply Lines is a fun card. I think Supply Lines is a good card. I think Supply Lines is a bad card, right? All these different thoughts convey information to other people about your thoughts on the game. And, then they can respond to those thoughts and say other things, et cetera, et cetera. The whole point is that you make friends, you make connections by giving something of yourself to someone else. In this case, it's, your time and your thoughts. And you might not always get something back, but you're never going to get anywhere if you don't reach out in the beginning. So you have to reach out. You have to give something first.
Absolutely. And that's definitely how I started competitive Eternal. So what happened was primordial origin stories. This is awesome. So I'm just browsing Eternal Warcry like some rando on the internet, because I was a rando on the internet. And I stumbled upon this deck that current teammate GCH built. It was called Give Me a Hot Cup of Milos. Now, for those not living in, I guess, Southeast Asia or Australia, Milo is like this malted chocolate drink that you can commonly find around here. But I surmise, in any case, that this is not something that the majority of people would know. So then I reached out to them on Eternal Warcry and I was like, hey, are you from Southeast Asia as well? Because you made a reference to Milo in your deck name, and I'm not sure if that was necessarily intentional, but it was really funny, and I super appreciate that. Also, your deck is really good. And then GCH messaged me back, yes, I did make an intentional reference to Milo. I'm so glad that somebody got that. And jump cut to a year later when we're both teammates, both on TEJ. So just reaching out and talking to people and finding that thread of commonality, be it game-based or not game-based, can really help you make connections with other people. I know this just sounds like the Storm's guide to how do I make friends, but even in an Eternal capacity, I think it's very important to reach out to people that you might enjoy spending time with.
I mean, the thing is, people are scared of reaching out, especially, in this post-pandemic environment, in a sense, because the lack of socializing, so to speak, has withered some people. I mean, scientifically, it has withered a group of people's, social skills, right? It bounces back relatively quickly, but there is literally scientific evidence that shows that, people's social skills, willing to socialize, has withered a bit because of, this isolation, that relative isolation that we've all undergone over the past 18 months, depending on where you live, of course. And beyond that, people are nervous about interacting in general, right? And of course, what this also means is you also have to kind of, as Stormguard put it, mostly not be a jerk. Maybe the way to put it is you have to be a jerk in specific ways, or not at all, right? I assume that mostly part refers to the sort of gentle ribbing that can occur between friends.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think part of what makes a good friend or a good teammate is that they are going to call you out for your bad decisions. And as someone who's made a lot of terrible deck building and or play and or any number of Eternal related decisions, I definitely appreciate when my teammates call me out on it, saying, come on, how can you not pack X removal spell in the deck? It's like the entire reason to be in these factions. And you're like, oh, yeah, I don't know how I missed it. And I think giving constructive criticism and being able to take constructive criticism and apply it appropriately is going to help you grow a lot as a player. Granted, being able to do so does take a bit of time. I know, especially when I first started out playing competitive Eternal or taking Eternal slightly more seriously, that there's a massive learning curve to it. And it's okay to struggle to necessarily apply or take into account what other people are saying initially, because you don't necessarily understand how to effectively convert that into what you are doing. And that's okay. It's going to take time, it's going to take some trial and error, and it's going to take a lot of practice. But that's what friends are for. And they will constantly, friends, teammates, whatever you want to call them, those delightful Homo sapiens, and one robot jellyfish are there to help you improve, to help you progress for. Now, having said that, you cannot be a blatant jerk. You should contest the idea and not the person. For instance, you should always say hey, I think that Shoal Dredger might not be the best choice of card in this deck because you don't necessarily have a way to give Shoal Dredger evasion, which means that they can often chump block it, as opposed to, oh my god, you are so dumb. How could you not think that Shoal Dredger would be awful in a deck with no evasion? Like, do not ever attack another person for their ideas, only ever attack, contest, dispute, whatever you want to call it, the idea. I mean, there is often some friendly, like, back and forth, joshing, etc. I know that my teammates love to make fun of me for playing Vision mid-range, and I accept that. But
Hey, Vision mid-range. I love Vision mid-range.
I love Vision mid-range.
Rip Silexes, right? Oh my goodness, I'm still so sad that we lost. I mean, probably for the best that we lost Silexes, but like Tangent, Silexes, you miss them or don't miss them?
I don't miss them.
Ooh, really?
They made like 3 faction decks with 2 Silex pairs just way too easy to put together, and you were able to be fairly aggressive in mid-range while still having card draw and a controlling game plan to rival control decks.
But on the flip side, it enabled, decks that weren't primal to function as control decks, which is the thing that we really haven't seen very much of. So, yeah. But I mean, they probably just like too good anyways. So, but yeah. Anyway, sorry. I got distracted by the ideas of Vision Mid and Silexes, and remembering display of Vision to get Silex and just reminiscing in the joy. Bring it all back together. Eventually, what you want to do is you want to engage with people you enjoy and people that you can respect the opinions of, right? There's a lot of people in the Eternal community. There's a lot of different opinions in the Eternal community. There are a lot of players with opinions, obviously. That comes with the territory of the differing amounts of, pieces in the game. And not every opinion you're going to enjoy, and not every person is going to say opinions that you enjoy or ever, maybe. You might never think someone says anything good. There are people in the community that are very controversial as far as the opinions they have. And if you like or don't like someone's opinions in an overall capacity, obviously don't reach out to that person, right? You want to find someone that you respect their opinions and that they respect your opinions, right? And that's sort of like the end goal, is to have a mutual respect together.
Absolutely. If you think about the advantages of being on a team, the biggest advantage is you're able to cover more ground. So say we're testing, Skycrag aggro, and I'm testing Skycrag aggro against Kira, and my teammate is testing Skycrag aggro against Elysian spells, right? And therefore, afterwards, after doing all our testing, we can pull our information together and therefore have information for both matchups. If you're unable to trust or respect the opinion of the other person, and therefore feel the need to test that opinion yourself, then you're not going to get anywhere with working with them, because then you've completely nullified the entire advantage of being on a team with that person. As the age-old adage goes, not everyone is going to like you, and that is perfectly okay. There are some things that people will just disagree with you on, or not like you just because of blank arbitrary reason, and that is perfectly okay. On the flip side, there will obviously be people who appreciate your opinions, appreciate your insight, and so on and so forth. And those are the people that you should seek out and work with. Don't try and shoehorn yourself into working with X group of people just because you think that they are necessarily better players. Yes, I am using air quotes, even though this is a podcast and you cannot see my air quotes. Being a good player and being a good deck builder by yourself is very important, but there is a lot of synergy and potential with other people. And finding the group of people that you can work well with is just as important as refining your own individual deck building and play skill.
Yeah, and this sort of all ties into our penultimate point. What is the current setup like, and what can you bring to a team? So Stormguard's talking about multiple testing groups and exploring a wider field. This ties into his first point about, think about what your strengths and weaknesses are as a player, and then see how that can utilize being a team, both because that will enable you to say what you can add to a team and where you can best test, and also to identify where maybe you can improve the most as well. Like, for example, one of my weaknesses is I'm not good at unitless control. I don't think I'm very good at Spellcrag. I don't think I've ever been that great in units control. Unit-based control? Oh, vision mid-range, vision control? Oof, I love it. In a testing environment, eventually maybe I'll hopefully refine that skill further, but like right now, I have someone like A rank who, when no one thought it was possible, managed to get, like, I think it was a top 4 with Spellcrag in the last Throne Open, and that was a very impressive showing. So, like, trust his opinion on the Spellcrags, and he also wouldn't necessarily recommend it either, which is one reason that we didn't take it, is because we trusted his opinion. So, you gotta do some introspection yourself.
Beyond just like deck archetype choices, I also think that necessarily like the roles you play on a team. So when it comes to like prepping overall for a tournament, you've got people to come up with the ideas, i.e. the brewers. You've got people who like refine those ideas and like tune those ideas, see if anything can come out of this deck list or this idea. Then you've got all the people who are very strong pilots who will play extremely optimally and thus give you the best understanding of how this deck will play out in the actual tournament. Now, as someone who's been playing Eternal, well, I've played Eternal for a while, but I only started playing competitive Eternal March last year, so March 2020. I'm not a very good pilot. I know my teammates know that I am not a very good pilot, and that is okay. That's why I always say, when talking about my deck lists, I always say, please try this out for yourself. I'm not sure if my own personal results are necessarily the best indication of what this deck is. And that's okay, because that is probably one of my biggest weaknesses, just a lack of raw actual experience in playing card games. Whereas I know that I am a very good, what's the word for it? Tuner, or like deck refiner. I look at deck lists, I see, okay, this is what you're missing, yada, yada, yada. These are my proposed suggestions, yada, 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 and this, so on and so forth. I think what might work for it. Just having a good balance of the different types of people on your team is very, very important, because there is no point in having a team with just a bunch of deck brewers. Like, you will have a constant deluge of deck lists just flooding your deck list channel, but you won't be able to like tune, refine, or practice any of those deck lists particularly well, which means when it comes to the tournament, all you have is a bunch of unrefined deck lists. So I think not only just consider what you contribute to the team, but also, does my biggest strength and my biggest weakness align well with the rest of the team's strength and the team's biggest weakness? And it's just seeing how you, as an individual player, can contribute to a team and what the team can give back to you.
You want to fit well together. You want to be a collection of puzzle pieces. You don't want to all have the same shape as a puzzle piece. You want to, have different grooves and different openings that you can then, mesh together, right? On TBC, for example, Batteries is obviously a well-known deck builder. Now, on the flip side, to mesh with that is Collector, who is less of a deck builder and is far better of a pilot than a deck builder, right? So then enables testing out any random shenanigans Batteries brings, if it ever looks good enough, depending. Sometimes it's 4 faction control deck Batteries. That aside, there are some impressive concoctions that Batteries put together, and having good pilots enables you to test out these concoctions in different ways. By not being the same, basically the rising tide lifts all boats. All of your cons get minimized, all of your advantages come together, and everything works better than being by yourself.
Absolutely. I know we talked previously about making sure that you can respect the opinion of other people. And yes, there are some opinions that may differ to you, but just because someone has a different opinion with you on a specific topic doesn't necessarily mean they're not capable of being a fantastic teammate, or the pair of you aren't capable of working together well. I thoroughly enjoy it when all of my teammates contest my opinion or my belief, and therefore I need to feel like, hey, so I know this doesn't make any sense, but because of the way that this card interacts with this card and the way these 2 cards interact with each other, somehow it actually works. And just compelling yourself into positions where you have to defend your ideas, think more about what you're doing, will, over the long run, help you improve as a player much more.
This brings us into our final point, and that is sort of an overall team structure and testing process.
As we mentioned, there are various team structures based on how you go about recruiting people in your team, but then there's also the actual individuals. So I'm going to use my own team as an example because it's the only team that I have as a frame of reference. So one very unique thing about TEJ is that we have people from all over the world. Like, I mean, all over. Like, we cover way too many continents. We basically cover every continent besides Africa and Antarctica on TEJ. So that means that people are spread across a lot of different time zones, which often makes like large group testing very difficult, but also means that a lot of people are not native English speakers. Sometimes some of my teammates will not necessarily be able to convey or communicate themselves in English as adeptly as some of the Americans might, right? That means that the way that we communicate information to each other through like text channels is slightly different. The example I'm going to use here is the testing diary concept that Watchwolf brought up as part of the Justice League experiment that we had for the Throne Open. Now, this was basically like after you've gone in enough sufficient reps with a deck, you would write a fairly lengthy Discord message about what your deck building process was for this deck, how you came to the conclusion of all the various cards, what are things you should look out for, things you have concerns about, what are things you're hoping to test. And it basically amount to like 2-3 messages worth of just text. Now, that worked, I think, fairly well for the Justice League because we were all native English speakers and we were all comfortable communicating in that length. But come over to TEJ, not everyone would be comfortable writing that much information. I still use it because I enjoy writing, but not all of my teammates were. So we have a slightly different approach to make sure that everyone can still convey that information with regards to testing to everyone else on the team.
And this sort of ties it all back to the beginning and how, team structure and testing processes will not all be the same and can be very different, wildly different. Even, from day to day, tournament to tournament, testing can be different. In the past, TBC has been a bit more organized, but recently, TBC is sort of just jams games, find a cool deck, jam it, see how it works, jam against each other perhaps. That's basically how Crossbows is made, right? Just jamming games and being in a voice call and talking about how the cards were doing, what plays are being made, and that was that. Other times we have had a not for I think season 3 so far, but we have had a Google Doc where we've recorded games down and stuff. Things can vary over time, right? You base it off of the current environment of people and how everyone's feeling, and you change it based off of what's going on. If something's not working, you keep the parts that are working, you scrap the parts that aren't working, and you move on from there.
Yeah. What you said nicely segues me into something else I'd like to talk about, which is the classic, let's all hop into voice chat together and look at this deck together. As you might have noticed, sometimes more of these formal teams will bring the same deck for a tournament. So for instance, in the most recent Expedition Open, the Super Conglomerate pretty much all brought Menace Crawl. And that was their team deck. That was the deck that they had all presumably spent numerous hours in voice chat all working together to iron out the details of. This was a deck they were all super comfortable with. Another instance of this is perhaps Team Rankstar. For instance, in the most recent Throne Open, I believe, the majority of Team Rankstar all brought Skycrag Sling because they all hopped into voice chat together. They knew all the lines with their Skycrag Sling deck, so on and so forth. This is fine. If your team can support large group voice chats, that is a perfectly reasonable avenue to working out what you want to play for the Open. On the other hand, as I mentioned, TEJ is a very, very international team. The odds that we can get maybe 4 people in voice chat at the same time are not particularly high. So when it comes to picking decks for the Open, we do on occasion have oh my god, this deck is unbelievably busted. It's by far and away the strongest deck, we should play it. It happens on occasion, not gonna lie, but more often than not, you don't have this like ridiculous breakthrough moment of a deck that will completely smash up in the meta. In that case, when it comes to like refining decks and picking the deck that you're more comfortable with and that's more refined, for our setup, it's usually very, very split. Like across a team, we might pack 4 or 5 different archetypes. And that's a result of not everyone being in a voice call simultaneously. If you're not there to see the deck being constructed, if you don't necessarily have a lot of experience with playing a given deck, then clearly you are not going to pack it for the open. And I think that working out what the strengths of your team are, what the weaknesses of your team are, and therefore catering and cultivating your testing process to fit those characteristics of your team are super important. Before you even start the testing process and whatnot, working out what you can and cannot do are incredibly important to make sure that you feel as if you've gotten the most that you can out of your testing time. So today we've talked a lot about various team structures and what goes into making a successful team. One article, though not strictly Eternal based, Alan Wu's article about working well as a testing team in Magic the Gathering. We will post the link in like the description of the YouTube video and so on and so forth, but I think it's definitely worth a read, and it definitely gave me and hopefully you a lot of considerations as to the different things that goes into making a team successful. I definitely don't have the breadth and depth of experience that someone like Alan Wu has when it comes to testing on a team for a competitive card game. And I think a lot of the insight that they provide has been very helpful for me, and which is why I'm recommending it to you guys. Hopefully get some information from that as well.
Let's finish off with our ongoing continuous segment of upcoming events. Just like last week, we have a similar set of events on July 16th and 20th. We have the Throne TNEs, so look forward to those if you are a fan of either watching or participating in TNEs. Both are great. And then on July 30th, we have the Expedition TNE, which is very interesting to note because that leads directly into the same day, as a matter of fact, day one of the Swiss of the Expedition 5K Open. So that certainly is both the TNE to participate in and the opportunity to watch the results of, to see how the metagame reacts. Like the specific metagame pre-Expedition Open, will some super conglomerate come in and swoop down, or will mirror what ends up looking like? So I'm very curious to see what happens there. August 3rd, we have the Expedition TNE as well. So right after the Expedition Open, again, super interesting to see how does the Expedition metagame evolve from July 30th being the Expedition TNE, July 30th to August 1st being the Expedition 5K Open, and then August 3rd, directly following the Open, being another Expedition TNE. So the trajectory of Expedition will be exceptionally interesting to follow there. And then, of course, following that is another exciting event, and that is the Draft Open on August 13th to August 15th. And I am very much looking for a Draft Open because I love drafting. And I assume a lot of you two are looking forward to those events too, so I hope you enjoy those. As always, SRFS, the man of many hats, does an excellent job being a great part of the community and also editing this cast you're listening to. So, big shout out to SRFS. And then I'd like to shout out all the Patreons, or at least, unless the number of Patreons has changed since I asked for a list from Sunny, because I don't have access to the Patreon account myself. And so I would like to thank Telemokos, Oddsos, Pubin, Coutilian, Alcid Bava, Work Dunson, Chamomilk, Chris Ye, D-Dub, and Yeastout for their continuing support FECast. FECast would not be possible without the continuing support of the patrons such as yourselves. And so big shout out and thank you for continuing supporting this. And remember, 3 things you learned today. Friendship is good, most people consume food, and most people aren't telepathic. This has been FECast episode 75, or Weatherport episode 2. As always, stay in the friend zone.
The Friends of Eternal Discord is the best place on the internet to get better at Eternal. We have players of all skill and experience levels, all happy to help each other out on basically any aspect of their Eternal gameplay. And making all this possible is our generous patrons over at patreon.com. If you'd like to support FECast or Friends of Eternal, consider donating at patreon.com/Friends of Eternal. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, we'll see you in the Friend Zone.